דבורה. אורי, אורי, דברי שיר.
יצירה מוסיקלית שהלחינה במיוחד לטקס המלחינה נורית הירש לפסוקי שירת דבורה.
שמעו מלכים האזינו אוזנים, אנוכי לאדוני אנוכי אשירה אזמר לאדוני אלוהי ישראל.
Then Deborah, she sang on that day, along with Barak ben Abinoam. When hair has grown long in Israel, and when people offer themselves up willingly, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes. To the mighty one I will sing. I will make melody to the God of Israel.
Judges 5 verses 4 to 6. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anat, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased and travellers kept to the byways. These verses from the ancient text we call the Victory Song of Deborah are written as a poem, a song in the style of a psalm, so that it could be performed by the people as part of their oral tradition, recalling the defeat of Canaanite adversaries by some of the tribes of Israel. It mentions places and people and memorable acts, the highs and the lows. These introductory verses carried meaning for the unfolding narrative, but their significance requires lingering on details. Firstly, God is addressed. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom. It's the same place, simply repeated, to bring to mind that God had delivered the people in the past in a miraculous show of power. Such commotions when the earth trembled and quaked, the heavens poured down with storms and tempests, thunder and lightning. And through these signs and wonders, the people were able to enter the promised land and take possession of it. And now, under threat, these words remind the people that this same power is present even now, bringing victory once again over the powers that would rob them of the land they felt rightfully belonged to them. It gave courage to the people. And then the song moves along to name two significant and brave fighters. Firstly, Shamgar, the son of Anat, who was reported to have slain 600 Philistines with a long prod used for cattle, and thus delivered Israel. But here's the thing. Shamgar was not a Semitic name, but probably descended from the Hurrians who had entered the land of Canaan a couple of centuries before the Israelites. Shamgar is understood to have been a Canaanite member of a warrior gang dedicated to Anat, an adolescent warrior goddess in the Canaanite pantheon. She was chosen to be the matron goddess of warrior bands in Canaan, and so it turns out not all of those who played a part in delivering a victory for Israel were Israelites, and sometimes they were Canaanites with a common enemy. We do well to open our ears and eyes and hearts to those who God uses in the history of salvation and liberation. Sometimes the least expected people contribute in great and unexpected ways. The text goes on to recall Jael, who did what she could to help the Israelite people, even though she was probably only a sojourner in Israel, and her husband was at peace with the enemy. It's reported that she killed Sisera, a commander in the Canaanite army, by hammering a tent peg into his temple. Gruesome. Brutality and barbarity have always been part of war and conflict, and even in our present time in so many places around the world. The victories of Shamgar and Jael are named in the context of a desperate situation. Life had become miserable, uncertain, unpredictable after so many years of oppression. The main roads were largely unoccupied because of the danger ever present from thieves, and travellers needed to move silently and swiftly along the byways and back roads to avoid being observed and robbed. Many merchants were forced to stop their trade because they couldn't arrange the safe transport of their goods. People fled villages and cities to find safe refuge and escape the burden placed on them by the Philistines and Canaanites. Life, as the people had known it, had given way to fear and ongoing violence. Theft robbed them of a way to ensure their livelihood. The people were dispirited. Would God look on them with compassion, see their desperation and deliver them as had happened in the past? Would the people have courage to rise up against the enemy? It was not easy to see how disparate Israelite communities, mainly agrarian rural dwellers, could work together for the common good to overcome the oppressors. This is the challenge and the opportunity that these opening verses set out, and the background for the account retold in Deborah and Barak's victory song in the verses that follow.
The peasantry prospered in Israel. They grew fat on the plunder because you arose, O Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, when war was at the gates, was spear or shield to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, those who willingly offered themselves among the people. Bless the Lord. Good morning. My name is Tanya Isa. I am a pastor serving the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I am currently serving at Grace Lutheran Church in Johnstown, New York. New York State is bigger than just New York City, and this is a small town a couple hours away from the city in the foothills of the Adirondack mountain range. So it's a very nice place to be. And yes, so I am serving as a pastor here. And Sandhya had asked me to just comment a little on the telling that you have seen me do on the portion of Judges, the Song of Deborah. And I just want to start out by saying, what the whole story of Deborah means to me. I was not always a pastor. I grew up in a church called the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which does not agree with ordaining women to be pastors. And as I was following God's call, and that's a very, very long story that I don't have time to share with you today, but maybe one day I can share my call story. But as I was in that time of learning to listen for God's voice and for what God was calling me to do, the story of Deborah was very, very important to me. And several years ago, I wrote an article in a journal called the Lutheran Forum about this. I did it at a friend's request. I don't usually write magazine articles, but I did do it this time for Deborah. So what Deborah means to me, the whole story. Growing up in a church where women's gifts were not always appreciated or acknowledged. I don't even remember the first time that I read this story of Deborah, but when I did, just the things that astounded me. So for example, if you go back to chapter 4, verse 4, it says, "At that time, Deborah, a prophetess, wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites came up to her for judgment." And so my question as I was in this church body that did not allow women to be ordained was always, well, wait a second, here's this woman named Deborah, and yes, she was married to a guy named Lapidoth, but we don't know anything about him. He was not part of the ministry that Deborah was doing. And she judged. People went up to her with disputes and she made the judgments without any help from Lapidoth or from any other man. And so having this example of this woman leader in the Old Testament was always a very meaningful story for me. To say, hey, look, why don't you guys ordain women when we've got female leaders in our scriptures? They're not always commonplace, but they're there. So why don't you ordain women? So that was a question for me as I was going through this process of listening to where God was eventually going to call me to be a pastor in a Lutheran church body that does ordain women. So the other thing that always struck me about the story of Deborah, she's a military leader. Well, maybe not exactly, the one, fighting or anything like that, but she's kind of like, she's the one that calls Barak and says, hey, Barak, you need to go do this. And Barak would not go into battle unless she came too, which again tells me about her status and how she was regarded among the people. This is a leader. People knew that she had God's favor. She was the judge and people followed her. So now more specifically about the verses that I told, which is Judges chapter 5, verses 7 through 9. The peasantry prospered in Israel. They grew fat on the plunder because you arose, O Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. That's just very, wow. She arose as a mother in Israel. She took care of her people, and the people, prospered under her. That's just even more testament to the amazing work that this woman was doing on behalf of God. People prospered under her because she arose. That's incredible. And then verse 8, when new gods were chosen, when war was in the gates, where was shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? So that's kind of this testament to, nobody wanted to do this. Everybody was afraid of the Canaanites. And yet Deborah led them and got Barak to do this military battle against Israel's enemies. My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. I think that's a very common sentiment for those who do willingly go out to fight the battles that are perceived as necessary. That feeling, that heart feeling, like, thank you for doing what the rest of us could not do, and thank you for keeping us safe. It's here in the United States, it's kind of, support the troops, feeling it's a, you're doing something that the rest of us cannot do, and you are protecting us, and we are grateful and we are thankful for what you are doing. You are giving of yourselves willingly, putting yourselves in danger. And then finally, that bless the Lord for the Lord's wonderful choosing of the people that will go and keep his people safe, because the Lord works through human beings, whether male or female. It doesn't matter. And that's amazing to hear from this ancient scripture. I think this song of Deborah is one of the oldest, if not the oldest thing that we have in our scriptures. And that it's come down to us through all of these years with feelings that we can identify with, that and telling us that even in ancient times, the Lord chose women to do the Lord's work. And that's an incredible thing.
Tell it, you who ride white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, you who walk along the way. To the sound of musicians in the watering places, there they repeat the triumphs of the Lord, the triumphs of his villagers in Israel. Then down to the gates marched the people of the Lord. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, break into song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam.
I said to Sandia that I don't have much of a relationship to the story of Deborah because we just never hear it. And that is just so typical. I mean, the story is quite short and it's lacking details. And so that makes sense. But still, these stories about women are lacking in the Bible and then in the lectionary. So I was really thrilled to take the time, spend time with Deborah. I'm very moved that she has this position in which she gets to make judgments, she gets to assess what's going on and to hear the word of God and to pass it on to others. And the thing is that I guess I would kind of expect that there'd be some explanation. How come there's a woman who's a prophet, who's a judge? How come there's this woman who gets to make these really grounded and trustworthy decisions between people in conflict and people trying to make, life decisions? How come it's a woman? But they don't tell that, and I'm so glad about that. She's just there. She just does it. And the word of God comes to her to speak to a great commander and to tell him to go down and to take on a big exploit. And even he says, I'll do it, but only if you come with me. There is no question about her gender. The question is only, can I trust the word of the Lord unless you come with me? And her answer is so honest. It's, yep, I can come with you. And you understand too that you are not going to get the glory for this. A woman is going to get the glory for this. You're okay with this? Okay, then let's go and let's do it. And that's honest. I wonder, how did you get in this place, Deborah? How did you become this person who sits underneath the date palm tree? How did you get to the position of trust that's unquestioned here? As women, we just wish for that we don't have to defend ourselves, and then we don't have to explain ourselves, and we don't have to always be doing something that will be pleasing enough that we can just do the thing that we feel called to do. So it's funny, I can't remember a lot of specific instances in which I was treated as less because I'm a woman, and that's because I've just set them aside again and again and again. But what I do know is if I sniff it, if it's anywhere near me, if there's this feeling that I get, and everything within me begins to rise up, and I have to keep on breathing. When I feel like I'm being diminished just because of who I am, despite what I have to offer. So, basically, I really appreciate Deborah simply for who she is and what she does. And then the adventure that comes after it is all just a bonus to me.
Judges 5:13 to 18. Then down marched the remnant of the nobles. The people of the Lord marched down for him against the mighty. From Ephraim they set out into the valley, following you, Benjamin, and your kin. From Machir marched down the commanders, and from Zebulun, those who bear the marshal's staff. The chiefs of Issachar came with Deborah, Issachar faithful to Barak. They set out into the valley. They rushed out at his heels. Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Why did you remain with your sheepfolds to hear the piping of the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Gilead remained beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he abide with his ships? Asher sat still by the coast of the sea, settling down with his landings. The people of Zebulun scorned death, Naphtali too, on the heights of the fields. That second half of the portion I just told, the great searchings of heart, the sitting still, the remaining, the abiding, that could be a contrast to Zebulun and Naphtali, who scorned death on the heights of the fields. but the others stayed away. They chose not to participate. I suspect my context as a leader in a congregation where, there's always the risk of diversity and differences causing division shaped my reading into the gaps. There's significant gap in motivation and purpose and meaning there. So that there's a hint of affirmation of, why'd you remain in the sheepfold? Well, you've got to hear the piping of the flocks. And is the piping of the flocks a metaphor for the piping of the military? Is the great searchings of heart a way of talking about being in prayer for those who are doing the battle? Gilead staying beyond the Jordan, is that a bad thing, or is that the defences on that side? The same with Dan and Asher, settling in by the sea. Is that shoring up their defences on the coast? Don't know. The commentators I read suggested there's room for interpretation, and it's not exactly clear to anyone really what's going on. So that's where Deborah's story met me in my leading of a congregation. There's also something about her as singing the song of the people, and I'm a poet, and I think as liturgists, when we're ministers, priests, pastors, we sing the song of the people. We help them sing their song, and there's collaboration. Deborah and Barak. For me, ministry is collaborative. So there were a number of resonances for me with the broader story of Deborah, as well as how I told the story from my context.
The kings came and made war. The kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh by Megiddo's waters, but they captured no spoils of silver. The stars fought from the sky. In their orbits they fought against Sisera. The Kishon River swept them away. The advancing river, the Kishon River. March on, my life, with might. Then the horses' hooves pounded with the galloping of their stallions. The Lord's messenger said, "Curse Medos, curse its inhabitants bitterly, because they didn't come to the Lord's aid against the warriors." I'm always really inspired and impressed with stories of women in the Bible, especially from Deborah's song, that powerful judge in the First Testament. It reminds me of Miriam's song as well, and there are echoes in the Second Testament, strong women like Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary of Magdalene. These women were strong and powerful. They inspired. So when I think about women in ministry today, it's not even a question. It's too often, though, men have slipped past these stories, including in the story today, we heard reference of Sisera, whom Jael took care of. Just these powerful stories, amazing stories of women doing the work, women leading. So really, we should be asking more, should men be in positions of power? Because women clearly should. And these stories remind us of that.
Judges 5:24-26. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Of tent-dwelling women, most blessed. He asked water, and she gave him milk. She brought curds in a lordly bowl. She put her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera a blow. She crushed his head and shattered and pierced his temple. My name is Lori. I am a pastor in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, United States. I work on a university campus with students. I have been a pastor since 1994, 27 years. I do not embrace violence of any kind. I don't like to watch it in film or read about it in books. It's just not my thing. And so I can't say that I really relate to this part of the text, or that I even have thought about Deborah very much at all in terms of my own leadership as a pastor in the church. But the place that I can connect with even this part of the story, this kind of gruesome part of the story, is in thinking that Jael is doing something for her people. She is saving Israel from the enemy in this act. And that's a place that I can connect because I'm a mother. And I think if I were ever to do violence, it would be in that context, to save the people I love, to protect them. And I think there's nothing I wouldn't do, probably, to be able to save my children. Other thoughts about Deborah in general are, I really admire her decisiveness. She knows what needs to be done because she has been listening to the Lord. And so she does that herself, and she tells others what they're supposed to do based on what God has told her. And I admire that kind of decisiveness and her collaborative spirit. She tells Barak what he must do, and she says, "Yes, I will go with you." She is working together with other of God's people to get God's work done in the world. And that is the place that I find a sister, a parallel in terms of leadership. Knowing what to do and feeling confident about that, that's probably an aspirational goal. And then collaborating with other people to get God's work done in the world. Thanks.
Judges 5:27 to 28. He sank. He fell. He lay still at her feet. And where he sank, there he fell dead. From the window, Sisera's mother looked out. Through the window, she watched for his return, saying, "Why is his chariot taking so long? Why don't we hear the sound of chariot wheels?" He sank. He fell. He lay still at her feet, and where he sank, he fell there dead. While this was the evidence of the enemy's defeat, the consequences of war are always for some bitter and for others sweet. For the Israelites, the death of Sisera at the hand of this courageous woman meant sweet and welcome relief, but to another mother, it would also bring about grief. Victory always comes at a cost and at someone's loss. Such is the nature of war. As Sisera lay there, victory was literally lying at Jael's feet, and the fate of Israel sealed by her hands. What bravery, what strength, what faith it would require of her. This is what was required of Jael, the woman whom God had chosen at this time in Israel's history to carry out his plans. Leadership, you see, calls us to task of great bravery and sacrifice. It requires us to do the unexpected, the unimaginable, the undesirable. It causes us to have to lay aside our greatest fears, our natural inclinations, our personal allegiances, so that we can do the thing that we have been called to do. Not so that it will bring us glory and reward, but so that it will bring glory to God. Fulfill his will and bring about good for the sake of God's people.
Her wisest ladies make answer. Indeed, she answers the question herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil? A girl or two for every man. Spoil of dyed stuffs for Sisera. Spoil of dyed stuffs embroidered. 2 pieces of dyed work embroidered for my neck as spoil. But may your friends be like the sun as it rises in its might. And the land rested 40 years. Many of my most powerful experiences in ministry have been as I engaged and worked alongside of women who are in ministry. They bring a sensibility to ministry, a creativity, a recognition that some things that have not worked the way we've done them, and it's time to listen to the new directions that the Spirit is guiding us. I can't imagine what my life in ministry would be like if it weren't for the presence of fierce, bold, delightful women who persist and insist on the world as God desires it to be. It's not always a gift for them, in my observations, to be in ministry. They are often treated as spoil, divided up to serve men's needs, as opposed to allowing them the agency and authority to carry out the ministry that God has given them. But when they do their work and are not divided up by men as spoil, but are given free rein to exercise what God's Spirit is calling them to do, rest and energy comes to the land, and it's as though the sun has risen upon the church and the world. I thank God for the gift of women in ministry that I have experienced.
I'd like to welcome you all to the digital component of my devotional, which is called Rise Up, Deborah. It's an inspirational devotional for clergy women who want to take up this as their profession, but they are inhibited in some way by the societal structures And I've had a beautiful rendition of the different components of the Song of Deborah from various renowned biblical storytellers from all over the world. And I want to summarize it and give you the song in its entirety. And on that day, Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang, saying, when the locks were long in Israel, and when the people gave themselves willingly, I will bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princess. I will sing unto the Lord. I will make a melody unto the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. When the Lord came down from Edom, when the Lord marched from the region of Seir, the earth shook, the heavens trembled, and the clouds indeed poured out water in the presence of the Lord, the Holy One of Sinai. I will sing unto the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the caravans ceased. The travelers kept by the byways. The peasantry, they prospered in Israel, and they grew fat in their plunder. For you arose, O Deborah, like a mother arose in Israel. When new gods were chosen, when war was at the gates, where could one find men amongst 40,000 of them in Israel with swords and with spears? My heart goes out to the commanders that came out willingly from upon the people to serve the Lord. I will bless the Lord. Tell of it, you who ride on white donkeys. Tell of it, you who sit on rich carpets. Tell of it, you who go by the byways. Tell of it to those musicians who gather at traveling places, rehearsing the triumphs of the Lord, rehearsing the triumphs of the peasantry. And the people marched down to the gates of the city, and they looked and said, awake, awake, O Deborah, utter a song. Awake, O Barak, lead away the captives, you son of Abinoam. And the remnant of the people marched down towards the gates of the city to fight for the Lord against the hand of the mighty. And Ephraim, they followed you into the valley, O Benjamin, along with your kin. And Machir marched down with the commanders. And Zebulun came down bearing the staff of the flag. Issachar and his captains were faithful to Barak, and they came down with Deborah, and they went out from between the legs at the valley. The clans of Reuben, there was much searching within their hearts. Why did you tarry so long in the sheepfold? Why did you wait for the sounds of the piping to be heard? As for the clans of Reuben, there was much searching in their hearts. And Gilead stayed back behind the Jordan, and Dan awaited by the coasts. Asher sat still in the ships and settled down amidst his landings. But Zebulun was a people that scorned death, and Naphtali too at the heights of battle. And the kings came and they fought. They fought by the waters of Tanakh, by Megiddo, and they got no spoil. And the stars, they changed their course in heaven and fought against Sisera. But the ongoing torrent, the Wadi Kishon, the ongoing torrent of the river, swept them away. March on with might, my soul. Curse ye to the inhabitants of Meroz, cried the angel of the Lord bitterly. Curse ye, Meroz, for they did not come up to fight for the Lord. They did not come up to help him in the day of trouble. Blessed are ye, Jael, amidst all women. Blessed are ye amidst the tent-dwelling women, for he asked you for water, and you brought him curds in a lordly bowl. And you put your hand to the tent peg and your right hand to the workman's mallet, and you went and you crashed his head, shattered his temple into pieces. And there he fell at her feet, and he sank and he fell, and where he fell, he lay dead. he lay dead. And the mother of Sisera peered through the window, through the lattice, and she said, "What is taking so long for the chariots to come home? Why tarry the horses' hoofbeats?" And as the white maids were preparing to answer, she answered to herself, saying, "Maybe they are dividing the spoil, a girl or two for every man, a spoil of dyed stuff, with embroidery, and for my neck, a spoil of dyed stuff or two with embroidery." And thus perished the enemies of Israel. And let your friends be like the sun that rises with all of its might. And the land had rest 40 years. And the land had rest 40 years. Awake, awake, O Deborah, utter a song. Awake, Barak, you son of Abinoam, and lead away the captives. Rise up, Deborah.